Do you have AAC users who feel alone in their classroom? Well, then this presentation is for you. What I'm going to be talking about today is fostering an AAC-affirming classroom. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about young classrooms in general education. There is so much to say about fostering an AAC-affirming classroom in a self-contained classroom where there are multiple students who are using augmentative communication devices. But today we're just going to talk about those kids who maybe are the only AAC user in their classroom. All right, we're going to start with our introduction. An AAC user may be the only student in their classroom with a communication tool, but they don't need to feel alone. Let's talk a little bit about who this presentation is for. I wanted to make a presentation that would be really good for a large number of people on an IEP team, frankly. So I wanted this to be very helpful for any speech pathologists that work with young students, with teachers, both general ed and special education teachers. Of course, families need to be involved in this. I really wanted admin to have an idea of how we can help our students with the most complex of needs, who needs tools for communication, and then other people on the team like PTs and OTs can also help in this process. What are some things that you are going to learn during this presentation? Well, first, we're going to work on identifying the problem. What exactly is the problem when it comes to AAC users within their classroom? Second, we're going to start labeling some steps to affirm and celebrate classroom AAC. Third, we're going to dispel some doubts that this can't possibly be done, because it can, and I've done it. And then last, we're going to leave with some action steps of things that you can do during the school year to help foster that relationship and help affirm AAC users. Let's talk a little bit about why this topic is important. And I want you to think of a student, a young child, maybe 5 years old, 6 years old, who either comes into the classroom with an AAC device or gets one partway through the year. Now, imagine all the other kids around them. They're like, what is that? What is that doing here? How come so-and-so is using that, right? So there's this element of otherness when only one child in a classroom has something that's different. And even more so than something like maybe a wheelchair is that a lot of kids just aren't exposed to AAC within media or within the community. So whereas you might see someone in a wheelchair, or they might even know someone who uses a wheelchair in their everyday life or on TV shows, it's just a lot less prevalent to see someone, especially a peer, who is using a tool for communication. Every child has their own story, and it's really important that we get to know what those stories are so we can help classmates to better understand as well. Hi, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Cherie Dodge Chin. I have a clinical doctorate in speech-language pathology, and I'm currently working on an educational doctorate as well. I have a couple of websites. The first is superpowerspeech.com. I was one of the very first SLP bloggers out there in the English-speaking world, so I have over 700 blogs. I would encourage you to grab a cup of coffee and take a look, because there's just so much out there. I also have a new element to my business, which is called Super IEP Coaching, where I coach families and school personnel and school districts on ways to really help get the most out of IEPs, especially for our children who have complex communication needs. You can reach me through @SuperpowerSpeech through Instagram and Facebook, or @Super IEP Coaching as well. And I do have a store where I sell digital products. It's been geared towards speech pathologists and educators in the past, but I am kind of branching out soon to include some resources for parents as well. So my financial disclosures are that I have Superpower Speech and Education business, and I also work for a school district within the east side of Portland, Oregon. Non-financial disclosures are that I am on the Oregon Speech and Hearing Association board, and I am also a member of ASHA's AAC-SIG. All right, we've got a problem, right? Not every student who uses a communication tool feels like they are welcomed and celebrated within their classroom. According to ASHA, the population of the United States, back up. According to ASHA, there are around 2 million AAC users within the United States. Now, I did a little bit of research to figure out what is the population of the United States. And according to what I found on the internet, there's about 239 million people, making AAC users about 0.6% of the total population. It must be noted, however, that in the 2 million that you see here, it doesn't indicate if they are aided AAC users who rely on an outside communication tool, or if they're someone who uses things just within their body, unaided, such as sign language, facial expressions, and pointing. So the percent of people who are using aided tools for communication is likely less than this 2 million. I did a survey with 62 respondents replied to this. I just put it out on Facebook. And I said, what percent of students that you serve are the only AAC users in their class? Because I wanted to get an idea of how prevalent this is. I know where I work, we have some classrooms that are self-contained special education classrooms where almost everyone in the class is using AAC. And so there's a lot of AAC use and modeling and celebration. But I also have a number of students that are in a general education class where they are the only person, not only necessarily in that class or that grade level, but sometimes the only person in the school who is using a communication tool. So of the 62 people who responded, and of course this was not a scientific there was no provisos on anything here. What we found was that the important number here is, to me, is this 22.6. So speech pathologists who answer this said that 22% of their AAC users are literally the only person in their class who is using AAC. So that's quite a few kids that we need to figure out how can we help them, and what supports can we give to not only the child, but to the classmates and the peers as well. What are some things that we know about learning language? Well, there's quite a bit of research out there that talks about learning a second language. And what they have found, what the research has found, is that in order to learn a second language, it is critical that we practice imitating and repeating others, right? Well, what is AAC? In many ways, it is like a second language. Things are not structured the same. Although the vocabulary might sound the same, you have to figure out whole new ways of communicating it. But if you're the only child in a classroom using an AAC tool, it's pretty darn hard to imitate and repeat others in order to get good at your AAC language. In addition, there's a lot of AAC research out there that supports the use of peers as communication partners. Matter of fact, Biggs et al. In 2017 said that peer support leads to more peer interactions for our AAC users and also increases communication as well. Nobody wants to be the only one doing something in their room and feeling alone, even if they're in the midst of a crowd. So this illustration is just the best I could find of what it feels like to feel different and isolated sometimes. All right. Okay, so there's also quite a bit of research out there that talks about what happens when communication partners are not trained. Now, you may know who communication partners are, but let me just review that for you. A communication partner is anyone who interacts with an AAC user. Anyone, right? So those range from family, teachers, peers, administrators, the clerk at the grocery store, doctors, babysitters, neighborhood people, everyone is a communication partner, right? But the most important communication partners in order to train are the ones who are going to be spending, pretty significant time with our AAC users. So of course, that would include everyone who's in the classroom with our AAC user. Matter of fact, Johnson et al. In 2006 said that there are several factors that are related to long-term success of using AAC. And the number one factor, of course, is that the person who's using it experiences success, right? Of course, if you're using AAC and nothing comes out of it and you're not able to communicate with anyone, then that's not going to make for a very good relationship. But the number two way that we can foster long-term success with AAC is by having the system valued by the user and their communication partners. In fact, reasons number 5, 9, and 13 for long-term success are all intimately related to communication partner training. So number 5 is that there's support for the system from the user and the family. Number 9 is that professionals on the team know about the AAC system. And then number 13 is that there's sufficient training for new partners. And I'm going to argue that new partners can be your 5-year-old little kindergarten students running around in the classroom. They can be your 6-year-olds. They can be your 10-year-olds. Age isn't really a limit here in terms of how we can train communication partners. So let's start looking at some classroom-based solutions in order to help our individuals who are using AAC not feel alone, get the support they need, and also have models around them helping them to learn this language system. So there are a couple of steps, and I'm going to walk you through what I did during this last year to help some of my AAC users who were the only ones in their classrooms feel empowered and that they were doing something special and that their way of communicating was not just different but valued and exciting, and it was just a great way to communicate. So, you ready? Step 1. What we're going to do is we are going to provide light tech communication systems to everyone in that class to explore. And you're like, what? What does that mean? So, if your AAC user is using one of the common commercially based high-tech AAC systems, then chances are pretty good that out there you can find on the internet a paper-based, one-page or multiple-page copy of that system. I know that Saltillo offers it just on their webpage. You can just look for downloadable boards to look like yours. You can find them for Lamp Words for Life. You can find them for Unity. I'm pretty sure you can get them from TD Snap. And if you're not able to do that, then what you can do instead is you can take a screenshot of that individual's device and then print that out. So if your individual is using a iPad-based communication app, then you can do a screenshot and you can actually just airdrop it to another iOS-based system. And if that doesn't work, then it's not great and it's not perfect, but you can take your own camera, right, and try to get away from the glare and then take a photo of that screen so that you can then transfer it to your computer and print out a copy for everyone in the class. And you're like, well, why would I do that? Well, we want to make sure that this system isn't other. We want to make sure that everyone in the classroom knows what, at very least, what the home screen looks like and is able to explore. What I found when I was doing this with young kids, especially kids who were not yet fluent readers, is they couldn't necessarily read what any of the symbols were. And as we know, those symbols don't always make sense. So it gave a great opportunity for our AAC user to actually tell them using voice output what was under each symbol. right? Another thing that you can do, and I highly encourage, is not only having light text systems for everyone in the class, but also having a big poster size one somewhere in the class as well, so that not only can everyone see what, we'll call him Johnny, what Johnny's device looks like, but the teacher can go up and actually point to things on the device or on the poster system as well. That makes for great modeling, and it makes the whole system seem like it is just less foreign and more readily accepted within the classroom. I am a big fan of letting students explore the light text system. And as a matter of fact, I prefer, but it is a lot more work, I prefer if they actually have access to some of the fringe vocabulary as well, because then they can really get an idea of what are some of the different words that are on Johnny's device and not just the homepage worth of words. Okay, so you have a light text system for everyone in the class. Please laminate it, because otherwise it's just going to get crumpled. And then our students need to find a place to put these when they're not in use. So here are a couple options. Number one, if allowed and if appropriate, it might be a great idea to actually tape these light text systems to other students' desks so that they always have access to it. Another thing that I found works really well is, because these are laminated, they can put them in like their book box if they have a book box right on top of their desk. Or if they have a desk with cubbies, they could put it right there where it's easy to find. Now, there's lots of different ways to put it away, but you do want to make sure that they have access to it on a moment's notice so that they can practice with it and use it when they're having conversations with their peer who uses the high-tech AAC. Okay, everyone has their light tech and everyone has been working on exploring it. Now we're going to have a classroom presentation on what exactly this light tech is and why it's important. So what I did is I created just kind of a generic presentation that I went into classrooms to do. Ideally, I would say that this presentation should even be done by someone who is much more familiar with the class. I came in as a stranger to the classrooms, and so the kids were like, who are you and why are you teaching us this? But what if we had our gen ed teacher actually teaching this lesson right from the first or second day of school? How powerful would it be? I'm going to walk you through what my slideshow looks like, and I am going to tell you how it works. So I start out by saying that we all need tools to help us succeed. And then from there, I actually have kids try to tell me what are some tools. Now, most kids immediately get in their mind like tools for building, right? So we have some kids that'll say a hammer, a saw, a wrench. And then every once in a while, you'll have kids that really know a lot about tools, and they'll come up with something that you're like, I don't even know what that thing is, right? But kids have some familiarity with the word tool. However, most kids don't think about tools as being something beyond just what we can create and build with. But it does make sense when they start thinking about a tool is anything that helps us do a job or a task a little bit easier. So I start going through, and if I have actual examples of individuals who use these particular tools, then I will put them into the slideshow as well, because I want this to be as realistic and real for the child in the classroom as possible. So I'll start by, I should also point out, if I don't have any examples, then I just find something from the internet and throw that picture on. So just so you know, you don't have to have individuals who use all these tools. So I start by saying Marla uses a tool, and then I ask them, especially if they can't read yet. I'm like, what tool does Marla use? And they're like, wheelchair, right? And then I say, why do you think she uses that tool? What does it help her to do? And I have them brainstorm, and then eventually they'll figure out get places, right? It's a tool. It helps us do something. It helps her to get places. And then I give another example, and I'm like, Jose uses a tool. What is this tool? And then the kids are like, most kids have some familiarity with some kind of hearing aid. And they're like, hearing aid, right? Why? What does this tool help Jose to do? And then they come up with the answer. Now, if you have kids that can read this whole sentence and you really want them to brainstorm on their own and not have the answer just right there, then you wouldn't have to use this sentence. You could just throw up the pictures and that would be great as well. Now, this is why that really gets the kids' attention, because they all know individuals who wear glasses, right? So I'll be like, Winston has a tool. What's his tool? And the kids actually have a little bit of trouble with this one sometimes because, again, they don't think of glasses as being a tool. But once they figure that out, you're like, yeah, it's the glasses. What do glasses help Winston do? And then they all know, oh, they help him to see, right? Because so many kids have experience with glasses from their home life. And then this one's really fun. I make sure to have a picture of the teacher using a tool. Now, I like it when I have a picture of the teacher using their phone because, again, kids don't think of a phone as being a tool, but it really is, and it really can be. So then I'll have a picture of the teacher using this tool, and I'll say, well, Mrs. Thomas uses a tool, right? What tool does she use? And then they'll see this and they've already been primed because of the glasses and they'll be like, phone. And then we have brainstorm. What are all the ways that this is a tool? How can this help Mrs. Thomas? And then I might give an example of remembering appointments, but kids can usually come up with quite a few other ways that Miss Thomas uses the phone as a tool. Finally, this here, and I have parent approval before I do this, I put a picture of our AAC user using their communication device and I put it right up on the screen. And then I say, Mark has a tool. And then by then they're primed. They're like, oh yeah, it's his talker. What does his talker help him to do? And then the kids, as long as it's a voice output device, are like, oh, it helps them to talk, it helps them to communicate, things like that. Now, if you had an individual who was using a light text system or a system that didn't have voice output, they might need a little more prompts for this, right? Because if they're using like some kind of core board or a picture exchange, you'll be like, I don't know, what does that help them do? And then you'll have to go through, well, let's think, these are words. What do we use words for? Oh, we use words for talking or writing or things like that, right? So I prime them with all these examples of other things that they're more familiar with and then get to the fact that this is a tool and tools are important and tools can help us to live better lives. So then I get a little more down and dirty into Mark's tool or whoever the student is. So I'll start with a picture of what the tool looks like. Now I could have an actual photo of the device. In this case, I just have a screenshot of what the home screen looks like, which again is the same thing that they hopefully have on their desk right now that they're looking at. And I'll say, Mark has tools with pictures and words, and his tool can even talk, right? So I make them a little jealous here because their tools can't talk. So now we're gonna find some words. Are you guys ready? Now, this is really fun. The kids love this because they love finding words. So if the kids are able to read, then it's pretty easy for them to find words, right? Just like adults are able to find the words a little bit easier. If the kids are not able to read, then this becomes a little more fun because then you start pointing to the pictures and you're like, what do you think? What do you think this picture represents? Right? And then you can go through with some others. Now, another way to do this, and you don't need to do this at all, but you could actually hide the words on here. If you have children that can read these words, you could actually hide these and then have kids guess what the different words mean. And you could bring Mark in there, like, so you have hidden the word help here and you're like, what do you think this one means? And of course the kids are like, I have no idea. That's like these like weird, maybe stick figures going like this. I don't know what that means. Then we could go, Mark, tell us what that word is, right? And Mark might be able to do that independently and he might need some prompts, but that's okay. It's going to make him the superstar here, which is our goal during this presentation. Okay, now this is what I'm saying to the kids, are going to learn to make sentences just like Mark. Are you ready? Let's practice making a sentence by pointing to your paper talker. And then we're going to practice making sentences. I like you. And the kids have to work on the motor planning in order to make that particular sentence. And then we go through what are some other things that you could say. And then we open this up for brainstorming. I want more would be one example. And then maybe we have turn it on, right? So this gives the kids just an open opportunity to play around finding words and creating and constructing sentences. You could even bring up situations, be like, okay, so for this example, we'd be like, okay, so we just walk into the classroom and it's really dark. How could we use our paper talker to tell someone what to do? And then they have to brainstorm. Not only do they have to find the words, but they have to think of what is it that we could use these core words for in order to figure out what to say. Something else that I think is really fun, and this only works for certain high-tech devices, but it's one of the reasons I like Word Power 60 is, and Proloquo has it as well. And actually, if you were to use LAMP Words for Life, you could do it as well. But you look at the categories, right? And you say, oh, look at this category. These are the people. So if Mark presses this on his talker, what do you think is going to come? Right, and then you can brainstorm what are some of the words that are going to be under people. Oh, places. What are some words that we might find under places on Mark's talker? And then in this particular example, groups is going to be huge, right? Because just about every category that's not on one of these others is going to be under groups. So that's going to be huge. So if you were using like a LAMP Words for Life or a Unity device, then you would look and you'd see like the apple. And you'd be like, there are some special words under this apple. What do you think might be under the apple? And then what's really fun is if you have a talker or Mark is able to help out, then you actually go to it and you press it and you show it to everyone, either by carrying it around, or if you have an overhead projector, you can put it under the projector so the kids can either be like, yeah, I got it, or, oh man, I thought it was going to be something else. Okay, now, this board has a lot of words, but it doesn't have all the words. It's really important to train these little peer communication partners that it's okay if you can't find every single word, right? So here's an example, guys. If we wanted to say, I want to play, I don't need to find all the words. I just need to find a few of them. So I could point to, I want play, or I could just point to play. Right? As long as I'm pointing to some of the words to get the idea across. Now, let's practice by saying that we like it or we don't like it. So everyone, get your boards ready. Are you ready? Okay. I like it. Everyone do that. Raise your hand when you've got it. Okay. Now we're going to try I don't like it. Now it's okay, we don't have to find do not for this purpose. It's okay to make it a little more simple. I know like it, or just know like it would work as well. And then what I do with the kids, and this is really fun, and they have so much fun, is I start showing them pictures of things. And I tell them, do you like it? And they have to tell a peer using their light tech communication whether or not they like these things. And I encourage my friend Mark, who's our superstar right now for this presentation, to also go along and say whether or not, they like or do not like each of these things. And I try to choose things that kids are going to have an opinion about. So I have pizza, I have Elsa, I have puppies. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and so of course I have to have rain. And then I tell them about how we need to be really patient. So I say, sometimes it takes a while to learn a new tool. How can we support Mark to talk to his friends? And from there, we start talking about some of the research-based communication tools that are tricky for our young students to understand. But I help them to understand that we need to give time, we need to wait. and we can practice what it sounds like in order to, or what it is like, I should say, in order to wait. And then we talk about modeling, showing on our own system so that Mark can follow along if he's having trouble with those words. We talk about listening to what Mark has to say, and that listening doesn't always mean using our ears. Sometimes listening means using our eyes about what is it that Mark wants to say so that we can communicate back to him as well. And then finally, the last part of this process is I open it up to the students and I give them the opportunity to ask questions to Mark. Now, Mark may or may not be able to answer these questions, and if he can't, that's okay. What I do is I usually will give Mark the first opportunity. I'll be like, Mark, Jonah wants to know, blah, blah, blah. What do you think? And then Mark maybe can answer it. Maybe Mark needs some prompts, or maybe the adult needs to step in at that point and say, what I think Mark would want to tell you is, and then kind of answer the question as well. I have found that the younger peers are just really excited about asking questions to the student in a way that they never were able to before, because everyone was like, I don't know what that thing is. And it really just opens up the doors for the communication device to be more used within the classroom, as well as more accepted. And now that the kids have played around with their own light tech version of it as well, it's not as foreign. It just feels like something that is a more natural part of the classroom as well. It's time to make our AAC user into the expert. Right? So what are some things that we can do in order to make our AAC user the expert, the star, the person who knows the answers? Some of the things that I came up with, and this is hardly an exhaustive list, is we can, throughout the day, throughout the year, all the time, on a regular basis, schedule in a time where our AAC user can show off their words. So, for example, we might have the teacher point to their light tech big poster that's up on the wall and be like, oh, today I think we need to make something new. Hey, Mark, can you say it in your talker voice so we can all know what it sounds like? Or we can give them a choice and we can be like, Mark, which one should we do? This one or this one? And let Mark have a choice where everyone gets to hear what the word sounds like and they had a valid choice. Another thing, and this is my favorite, this is what I actually did my dissertation work on, is having them help to read a story. Now, there are a few ways that we can do this. So first of all, we can have the teacher or a peer reading a story and prime our AAC user to have certain words or certain phrases ready to go so that they can contribute to the story. My favorite way to do that is by using repetitive books, or by using a story in which, like, maybe we have an animal, and so every time we get to the animal's name or title, our AAC user is able to help contribute and be part of that storytelling. If the AAC user really struggles with finding words on their device without a lot of prompts, because book reading is something that you want to flow pretty naturally, then start setting up a mid-tech device for them where they can press a single button and it will read a repetitive line, or it will read a single word, or anything like that. We want to make sure that our AAC users really get to feel included and part of the community. Okay, this one is really fun. So you'll know if you happen to use LAMP Words for Life, the fireworks words, as I call them. They also are under social if you're using Touch Chat with Word Power. Every device that's a robust device is going to have some kind of exclamations, and those can be the best. You can also put those onto a step-by-step single button as well. But what you are going to do here is you're going to find times when it is just so appropriate and so fun for our AAC user to say something like, "That's crazy," or "cool," or "I like it," right? Because what a great way to get social acceptance by your peers by making these exclamations. And they can be ones that, again, are ones that they kind of came up with on their own, or they can be ones that had been pre-recorded if you're using a mid-tech device. I know I had this one student years ago who she was just rocked those exclamations. And so she would, in the middle of class, she would say something like, "That's crazy!" And all her peers would look at her and just laugh. And in a good way, right? Because she was part of the classroom culture and they knew that that's just how she communicated, and it really, her personality just shined through by using those exclamations. Finally, one more idea, and of course, this is not the end of ideas. This is just one more for right now, is you can turn a copy me or Simon says activity. So how this would work is your AAC user would find a word, especially on the home page, right? Because all your friends have the home page as well. And then everyone needs to find it after they use it. And they can't show any of their peers, right? So they hear the word go. And then everyone needs to as quick as they can, find the word go and maybe raise their hand when they found it. And so that allows your AAC user to lead the whole class activity, which of course can be a super powerful thing for our students. Okay, now let's go to step 4. Now step 4 is primarily targeted for adults or older students. If you recall, back when we were giving the presentation here, we kind of alluded to what are some ways that we can help Mark in order to communicate more. Well, now let's talk about what the research actually says, because these are really important ways for our communication partners to make sure that our AAC users are getting the most out of their communication and their communication systems. And again, this is a little trickier for our younger students, but we can still, help teach them these tricks over time. So I have an acronym that I like to use. It's only 4 letters, and it is a really good summary of what the research says is important in order to foster communication partner relationships. The first letter is W, so it spells wise, right? Like the wise old owl. So the first letter is wait. Wait for it. It's really important that communication partners are waiting at least 5 to 10 seconds when they're expecting a response. And sometimes that's just going to be what they call like an expectant pause or a pregnant pause. You're going to say something, not a question necessarily. You're just going to make a comment and then wait to give our AAC user time to respond. Here's an example. Whew, sure is sunny today. Now, maybe our AAC user responds to that and was like, yep, or no, or I like it. And maybe they don't, but it at the very least gives them time to process what you said and think, maybe she wanted me to say something there. Okay, the next part of the WISE acronym is to invite. So we want to invite our AAC users to participate in our conversation through any mode with comments and open-ended questions. And this is key because our goal here is not to make the AAC into an answer box. It is not an answer machine. It is a way to communicate. And so saying, say 4, say 5, where's 10, find, go, just as a quizzing type technique is not going to get our users excited about using their device. But instead, inviting them to maybe have, say something that's totally new and novel and you would never expect. Like, where do you want to go this summer? Right? And maybe we need to provide some prompts to get them to go to places, but from there's no right answer. You don't know what they're going to say. And then whatever they say, you just, wow, that's so exciting. You said that you want to go to, the woods. Wow, I think we'll have so much fun in the woods. It's going to be awesome. So really invite them into that conversation, especially conversations where there is no wrong answer and you're not just quizzing them. And then our S part of WISE is to show. Because we know that many of our AAC users are very visual and they rely on their vision a lot in order to communicate, we want to show what we're saying by modeling on a communication system. Now, we might have access to a communication system that looks just like theirs. We might need to borrow their communication system. Some students are totally okay with this and some are not. Or we might need to use a light tech paper version. But remember how we are working on teaching basically a second language? We need to be able to show our users how we are saying things so that they know that it's a valid way of communicating, but also so that they can find those words that maybe they didn't know existed. Remember, if you can't read, those symbols are very abstract. I don't know what those mean until someone shows me what they mean. And finally, the last part of WISE is expand. And that's where we're taking whatever our AAC user is communicating and we expand it by adding a few more words, pictures, or sentences. So if our AAC user is using a device and they say like, then you can add a couple more words or even just one more word. Oh, you like dogs. Wow. Or maybe our AAC user is not using their device and they're just giving you a funny face, right? You walk into the room holding some food and they go, oh my goodness, you're telling me you don't like that food or it smells bad. Here, this is how I could say that on the talker. And then I might model how I could say it on the talker, but I'm not necessarily going to force them to say it on the talker. They already told you just fine. They did it by doing their funny face, right? So you understood them. So just show how you could do it on the talker. Okay, so here is this is just a photo of me demonstrating the WISE techniques. I actually have a full video of it on my website, but I believe. But what you can see here is I am right next to the user, the AAC user, and we have our book right there because again, I love using book for activities. And we have our communication device right there. In this case, it's a core communication board that has fringe on the top. And I am reading the story and then I'm modeling on that light tech communication device. And what you would find if you were able to see this video is that she doesn't respond very often, but I still provide her on every single page. I provide 5 to 10 seconds of wait time to see if she's going to tell me anything. I will take any kind of communication that I feel like she is giving me, whether that be with the communication board or with her face, and I will expand it. I also show her how she might want to say some things that have to do with the story as we go along as well. I think it's key to see that we're right next to each other and we're both focused on the same system. Okay, and then finally, step 5 for fostering an AAC affirming classroom is that we need to make sure that we're using AAC and that we turn it into a habit that's being used throughout the day within the classrooms. So we need to make AAC opportunities into a habit for not just the AAC user, but also all the communication partners, the peers and the teacher. If you have ever read the book Atomic Habits, which is a great book by James Clear, what he says in there is that place and time help trigger new habits. So what's going to happen if you don't make using the AAC into a habit, at least in the beginning, is that people are going to forget that it's even available, right? They're going to be like, oh yeah, I don't think Johnny's used his talker all day today. But if you make it part of the routine, every day we pull out our books for reading and Johnny gets to introduce the story. Every day when we get ready to go to lunch, Johnny gets to tell us what he's eating for lunch today. Make it into a habit just to start things off so that we know that the AAC user is going to use their device at least a few times and hopefully build that in to be more and more and more and more throughout the day and not just a few times. But we also know that a lot of communication partners, especially adults, get overwhelmed at the idea of being like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to make this a habit throughout the whole day. So what we often will tell them is make sure that the device is within 2 feet of them at all times. right? That's key, because if you don't have access to it, you can't use it. And build it into your routine. Make a habit of using it during at least one activity each day for the first week, and then build it into 2 activities the second week, 3 activities the third, and slowly build up so that eventually it's just easy for the teacher to be building it into activities throughout the entire day. So here are some potential triggers. Now, a trigger can be a bad thing, right? But it can also be a positive thing. So some potential triggers to help remember AAC use, and that you want to make sure that it's being used. So when it's book time, that might be a trigger. Or when you're just going to lunch or coming back from lunch, that might be your trigger. And then you're going to rinse and repeat, right? So every day, same trigger, same place, same time, same location, you're going to do it again and make sure that that AAC user has an opportunity. And another thing to make it into a habit is sometimes it's really useful for some of our AAC users, especially when they're new to the device or they're early language learners, to pre-warn or pre-program the messages. So I know that in the past, I used to sometimes go up to one of my students and be like, they're going to call on you soon, so make sure you get ready to say your answer. Or later today, or later in this story, they'll be using the word like. So if you want to participate, get that word ready. And then we have to work on the whole timing of when do we say it. We don't say it right away. That's its own issue. That's a learning issue. But pre-warning or pre-programming messages into devices or voice output can really help trigger that habit, or help make that habit easier to implement throughout the day. Okay, so let's look at some frequently asked questions. I know that this is not the end-all be-all of how to create an AAC affirming classroom. In fact, I'm working with some students right now on doing some individualized peer play with communication devices, where my AAC user has their device and then I provide a secondary device to a peer so that they can both be using talkers during a fun play activity. So that could be a whole different presentation here. But for now, let's just talk about this. So one question that sometimes gets asked is, if the goal is, and I put this in quotes, speech, why are we teaching others about the AAC system? As we know, some of our AAC users are not always going to be AAC users. This might be something temporary to help them right now as they're learning language. I think that it's really important here that we get our communication partners to understand that the goal is not mouth speech here. That what we really want to do is make sure that our AAC user has a way to communicate and a way to connect with others. And by making the assumption that the child is going to use mouth speech or should be using mouth speech, we're just looking at it the wrong way. Here's another frequently asked question. What activities can the AAC user help lead? Remember, I told you that when they're in charge of leading something, it helps to validate their communication system, as well as helps make them into a really valuable part of the classroom community. And I would say anything that they love. So some examples of that are, we talked about Simon Says. Another thing is they could help lead by making the choice for what song we're going to sing today or what we're going to play. They can provide ideas for recess activities. And then, of course, one of my favorite is repeated lines in a book. It's so fun when you're reading a book and you get to your repeated line and you're like, right? Because that is Johnny's special job. He gets to do that line within a book, and he's got a really important role. Some kids get to be the door holder that week. Well, maybe that week Johnny gets to be the repeated line in a book person. Okay, how much time is it going to take to create a class-wide system? So this is how I feel very strongly that it can take less than a month if You have a habit-forming routine that's established by the teachers and the staff. So once you get your introduction and you teach the whole class about the system and you provide sample systems to all the kids in the class, how long will it take? Well, it depends on how often you're inviting that AAC user to participate in the class, to lead things in the class, and to feel like a part of the community. If it's happening every day during some routine and expands to be more and more routines, then you can really get this down in less than a month. Who do I need buy-in from for this to work? Well, first of all, you definitely have to have buy-in from the AAC user and family. I have always gotten permission from the family before I started this, especially because I'm going to be pointing out some of the differences that this child has, and not all families feel comfortable with having that pointed out within the classroom. Also, when I talk to the family, I ask them, do you want your child to be in the room for this presentation? I hope that they're going to say yes, because I really want to make this presentation about making them the star and making them special. However, sometimes family will be like, no, they don't need to be in the room for that, or I don't want them to hear, some of the questions that are being asked. And it's really important to respect the family's wishes. You also need to get buy-in from the classroom staff. If the teacher or any instructional aides are not bought into this, then it's really going to flop. You're going to give a presentation, and then that's going to be it. That's going to be the end. And then finally, it's really helpful if your administrators buy in as well. If you have administrator buy-in, then they can help support you in making this part of the teacher's habit. So if later you're like, I don't know, is Johnny really getting to use his device multiple times during the day as part of, just the classroom routine, then you have backup from your administrator as well. Okay, and finally, do we need to do the training again and again and again every year? Well, so my answer is probably. If you have a new teacher, then for sure. And if most kids in the class have switched, then yeah, you need to make this, something, and you can vary it. It doesn't have to be the exact same presentation, but you want to make sure that the main people that are interacting with our AAC user are familiar with what it is, how it works, and why it's awesome. Right? So you need to be thinking of all those things. Now, in some classrooms, I understand the kids don't change, the teachers don't change, then maybe you don't need to go through this whole thing again, as long as it's definitely become part of the habit and routine for the classroom. Okay, you ready? We're on to some action steps. What are some things that you can do right away? Number 1, consult with the AAC user and the stakeholders. So the first step you can do is talk to our AAC user and their family and their teachers about what can we do to really make this system celebrated and affirmed within the classroom. Number 2, you can create a lesson, right? That's how I usually start things off, is I create some kind of lesson. I use my slideshow. You could use a book. There are various books about, so-and-so has a talker. I tried that once and I felt like it wasn't quite personalized enough, and so that's why I made changes and ended up doing my own device, my own slideshow, but those are totally valid as well. And then I think it's really important, step 3 is to make our AAC user the star. They need to know that their way of communicating is special and awesome. You need to invite the classmates and the teacher in to try to communicate that same way as well. It's no fun learning a new language in isolation, right? It's much more fun to do it together with others and to be celebrated for making our brains grow and really learning that system. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. I'm really grateful that you have stuck around till the end in trying to learn ways to create an AAC affirming classroom. If you have any questions or comments or are looking for a consult or speaking, especially if you're a school district, then hit me up at Cherie@superpowerspeech.com. And I really appreciate you being here, and best of luck to you.